The jurists maintain that the Sunnah is the second source among the sources of Islamic law. If the jurist does not find a text in the Quran for a case he has to settle, he has recourse to the Sunnah for the derivation of the legal rule. The evidence for this is the well-known tradition of Mu'adh ibn Jabal, who was sent to Yemen by the Prophet, peace be upon him. In addition to this, there is the letter of Umar ibn Al-Khattab to a judge in which he instructs him to follow the Quran first and then the Sunnah. As regards the status of the Sunnah being secondary to the Quran for proof of the legal rules, the jurists maintain that the Quran is definitive with respect to its narration in its details and as a whole, while the Sunnah is definitive as a whole, but not in all its details. Because many of the reports are of the status of Khabar Wahid, the Sunnah, being an elaboration and commentary on the Quran, is not required to have recourse to it unless a text requires elaboration and commentary. If the text of the Quran is explicit in its meaning, it is to be acted upon. But if it is apparent having more than one meaning, it is necessary to have recourse to its commentary, which is the Sunnah. As the Sunnah is a primary source of law, the jurist has recourse to it for the derivation of the legal rules. It is secondary and complementary to the Quran. The authority of the Sunnah as a source of law is derived from the Quran. The legal rules derived from the Sunnah are, therefore, considered an explanation of the meanings in the Quran, even when the Sunnah appears exclusively to be dealing with a legal rule. A close examination reveals that the legal rules so revealed are based upon principles found in the Quran, and the Sunnah is merely extending the meaning of these principles or is linking up the rule with the principle. This may be elaborated in the following points. The first point is that the Sunnah is a commentary of the Quran. The legal rules are often found in the Quran in general, undetermined or unelaborated form. The Sunnah elaborates, restricts, or qualifies these legal rules. Examples of the Sunnah elaborating the unelaborated are like the timings of prayer and their number, as well as their rakats, elaboration of the kinds of wealth in which zakat is to be paid and the amount to be paid in each, as well as the time of obligation. In the case of riba, an example of the restriction of a general meaning is to be found in inheritance. For the male, 2 shares of the female. The Sunnah explains that the murderer will not inherit. The example of elaboration is in the case of theft, where the Sunnah elaborates the meaning, saying that the property must be removed from the place of safe custody and that it is the right hand that is to be cut. The second point is that the Sunnah links a vacillating case with a known principle. The Sunnah sometimes lays down rules that are not mentioned in the Quran. These rules appear to be additions over the meanings in the Quran and cannot be considered as elaborations or qualifications within the categories explained in the previous point. Some jurists, however, are of the opinion that a closer examination reveals that these rules are an elaboration in the sense of classifying a rule under a principle. Often a case vacillates between 2 principles, and the Sunnah links up the case with one of these principles. For example, the Quran has in a general way permitted all good things and has commanded the avoidance of khaba'is. The Sunnah has linked with the khaba'is the consumption of animals with molars and birds with talons, just as it has prohibited the consumption of domesticated donkeys. The Quran has permitted the consumption of seafood and prohibited carrion. The dead fish in the sea vacillated between these 2 principles. The Sunnah linked it with permitted food, saying, its water is pure and its carrion is permissible. The Quran permitted a slaughtered animal and prohibited carrion. The separated fetus of an animal after slaughter vacillated between the 2 principles. The Sunnah linked it with the slaughtered animal, saying, the slaughter of the fetus is the slaughter of its mother. In these examples, we find that Quran laid down 2 general principles, but there were certain cases that vacillated between them with the possibility of falling under either principle. The Sunnah attached the case to one of the general principles. Thus, The principle is mentioned in the Quran, and what appears to us as an additional rule laid down by the Sunnah is actually a category of the principle. The function of the Sunnah here is the analytical development of the law. The third point is that the Sunnah performs analogy on the basis of a rule in the Quran. The Quran sometimes lays down a principle or a rule without elaborating on all the categories falling under that principle or covered by the rule. The Sunnah links a resembling case with this rule, and this function appears to be similar to analogy. The Quran prohibits marriage of two sisters to one man and then says that what is besides this is permitted. The cases of a woman along with her maternal or paternal aunt are also similar because of a common underlying cause. The Sunnah, therefore, prohibits such marriages too. The Quran mentions that pure water descends from the sky and is preserved in the earth. The case of seawater was not settled. The Sunnah declared that it is pure, and even its carrion is lawful. The fourth point is that the Sunnah lays down general principles. The Sunnah sometimes lays down a general principle, the individual categories of which have been mentioned by the Quran. For example, the Sunnah lays down the principle, no injury is to be caused or borne. The Quran mentions a number of cases in which injury to others has been prohibited, like injury to parents because of their child, or injury to wives and so on. The prohibition of injury or harm is a general principle that is formulated by the Sunnah. The fifth point is that the Sunnah elaborates the meaning of words in the Quran. An example of this is the distinction of the white thread from the black thread during the month of Ramadan. The Sunnah explains that this is the light of the day and the darkness of the night. And the sixth point is that the Sunnah abrogates the Quran. The jurist provides several examples of this that we shall have occasion to look at later. Imam al-Shafi does not accept this and says that only the Quran can abrogate the Quran and the Sunnah can abrogate the Sunnah. Some modern scholars deny the theory of abrogation altogether.